Let's make the home-cooked meal from Skyrim. So here's the thing. The model from the home-cooked meal is just the apple pie model flipped. I'm sure Todd Howard was involved in that decision making, but I don't want to just make an apple pie. I want something savory that increases my health, stamina, and magic recovery, and that I can only receive once per day. Ideally from Usalda. So let's cook something fit for a dragonborn. To begin, we need to make a pie crust, and we're going to need a double batch since we need a lattice topping for this. We need to combine 20 ounces of flour in a bowl with 2 teaspoons of salt and 1 tablespoon of sugar, giving that a little mix before setting that aside. The sugar here does not make it sweet, it just encourages browning. Then we need to cut up 4 sticks, or 16 ounces of butter, into small pieces, then toss them into the flour mixture, then work the butter into pea-sized pieces with your hands. After that's done, we can grab a bowl of ice water and slowly mix in a tablespoon at a time until we get a very shaggy dough. At that point, we can split this into 2, smushing each of them into a disc wrapped with plastic wrap to hang out into the fridge until we need them. So it's time to work on the filling. I'm going to start by making a sort of gravy for the pie since I want this to be well hydrated. I'm going to make a roux here, but I'm adding in a little bit more flour than the butter to make it slightly thicker. Traditionally, it's just 1-to-1. We're going to start with 2 tablespoons of butter into the pot, and when that's melted, we'll add in 3 tablespoons of flour, mixing that constantly until we get a sort of dark blonde color, making sure to get in the corners where it likes to burn. Now, since this roux is hot, we'll need a cold stock. I'm just using 1 cup of this chicken-lamb blend stock that I made previously, whisking that in until it's smooth. Once this comes to a boil, we can season this, check the thickness of it, then set it aside until we cook the rest of this filling. We're going to chop up all our vegetables here, which is 1 onion, 1 potato, and 1 small leek, and peel 2 cloves of garlic. For the onion, cut off the tip, peel it, then cut it in half through the root end. Leaving the root in place to hold the onion, we then need to make 2 cuts through the base, cuts perpendicular, then finally cuts this way to get our pieces. Set that aside and let's cut the potato. We want the skin on in this case, so we'll need to give it a good scrub to remove any dirt, then cut it into less than bite-sized pieces. Store those in cold water until we're ready to cook them. For the leek, cut it in half, then take it to the sink to make sure you wash away any dirt in between the leaves. Then we can cut it in half again, roughly chopping for ease of cooking. For the garlic, just crush it with your knife, peel it, and then just use a garlic crusher when the time comes. Back to the stove, let's put the potato on heat after adding in lots of salt, and bring it up to a boil until just shy of fork tender. We don't want to overcook it because it will fall apart in the pie if we overcook it, turning it into mashed potatoes. While the potato is boiling, let's work on the rest of the meal. In a separate pan, we're going to heat up a little bit of olive oil, then add in our onion and leek, cooking it until softened. Once the onions are transparent, we can crush in the garlic cloves and add in our meat. Since elk are everywhere in Skyrim, I thought the main meat of this should be elk, and luckily I have a pound of it here. We're cooking this until we can't see any more red, then we can taste for seasoning with the salt and pepper. I'm also going to add in a little combination of some thyme and some sage. Then we can combine that with the drained potato and gravy, setting that in the fridge to cool until we're ready to use it. We want it to be cooled so that it doesn't encourage a soggy bottom on the pie. Now it's finally time to roll out our pie dough. We're going to start on the bottom, simply rolling it out until it can fit in our chosen dish. Notice how I'm lightly flouring and turning it a quarter when I roll it out. This helps get it relatively circle-like, but this by no means needs to be perfect. You can also generally tell how thick it is just by running your hand over the surface, but eventually we can then roll it onto our rolling pin and then roll it off into the dish. You want to just gently lift this and drop it into the dish. You don't want to stretch it in or you'll encourage more gluten development. Now we can go around cutting the excess pie dough. You want to leave about 1 inch on for right now because we will be tucking those in later. I'm then going to roll out our second dough just as the same as the first, but I'm also going to be cutting it into strips so that we can get a semi-lattice on top, just like the model in game. I'm cutting a few of these extra thin so we can get those little diagonal strips. We are then going to grab our dish, fill it with the cooled filling, then lay out these lattice strips, alternatively picking up each one to lay the next strip down perpendicular to it. I'm also just going to jerry-rig in these diagonal strips, then tuck them behind the dough base. Then I'm going around tucking the dough behind itself or underneath itself so we can get a nice thick crust. You can also do a little dimpling here to make it cute, but I feel like some of the marriage options in Skyrim wouldn't be doing all that. Now I'm putting this in a 375-degree oven for about 35 to 40 minutes, or until the lattice dough on top is a nice light brown. You don't necessarily need to worry about cooking through the meat in the center since we did a lot of the pre-cooking to a safe temp earlier. Now look at that. You should ideally let this cool for about 20 minutes before digging in, but I had some adventuring to do near an archery range, so I was a little impatient and cut it into it a little early, which did make my first slice look a little ugly. However, for the second slice, you can see the dough was standing beautifully, there was no soggy bottom, and the flavors were wonderful. I ended up being very happy with my decision to use elk because it did give it a little gaminess to the final product, which just felt very immersive. Maybe I should have considered pairing this with some meat, but there's always tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment about which dish I should make next. I'm a new channel, so this really helps me out. I'll see you next time.